this is your first time doing a podcast.
Yes, it is. Case of beer, I owe you, I guess.
Yeah. So you've done a number of things in the United States Army. You are now retired, and you now have a company called Storm Tactical Consulting. Can we talk about the company a little bit? Like what motivates you to start it and what you guys offer?
Yeah, absolutely. So the reason I started this company was I took a job with a big defense contractor when I first retired from the Army. And the defense contracting world is very cutthroat. There's a lot of people out there that they like to use people's resumes from our industry and benefit themselves and make a lot of money. And then they like to dump on eventually the guys like us who they use to get what they want, those big contracts. So that and the other reason, I guess, is there's a lot of frauds out there. And, I'm not going to get into specifics who exactly, but, we see them. We see them on social media. And a couple of buddies of mine and myself decided to kind of be the Mythbusters, I guess, if you will, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And kind of get out there and, put the ground truth out there, man, and let people know how it really is. And, it's a different world now. The threats are everywhere. They're right here in our backyard. So, guys like us, we want to kind of share the knowledge that we gained through trial, error, and a lot of bloodshed, and maybe make a living at the same time,
Right, because everybody has to make a living.
That's right.
It's certainly important, I think, for civilians and even guys like yourself to kind of stay sharp on your skill set and whatnot. But, now with the war going on for so long, there's so many guys getting out and starting companies.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
There's a lot of companies, and I think the market is kind of oversaturated. And then, like you said, there are some people who perhaps aren't as qualified as they make themselves seem, or they aren't qualified at all to teach, tactics, shooting or whatnot. And,
right.
And I think that could be dangerous because of the nature of the training.
Yeah, exactly. It is extremely dangerous, depending on what capacity you're kind of diving in with.
Right. And so what exactly is it that your company offers in terms of training?
So it's kind of a wide umbrella. Mostly shooting. We do some, some niche stuff with some people that actually like Rangers. I've worked with the Rangers. I've worked with some SF guys. I've worked with some SEALs, and I offer real niche stuff on the side with the shooting and the tactics. Do a lot of CQB training, a lot of basic CQB, a lot of fundamentals. Getting the fundamentals out there, because where I came from, we were really good and we were really fast. And the only reason we were those things is because we mastered fundamentals. We mastered the basics. And you'll hear that from a couple of colleagues of mine that are out there that are also competitors. But mastering the basics, learning the fundamentals, and practicing those fundamentals so much that they become, you heard the terms muscle memory, neurological pathways, building that untrained, or I'm sorry, not untrained, but not conscious thought, response.
Right.
Involuntary, I guess.
So basically training to the point where it's like a reaction. You're not even thinking about it.
Yes. Repetitions. That's correct.
Right. And I think that what's interesting about some of the philosophy and mindset that you and guys like yourself share, it's very unique to the military and to special operations, but it also, in my opinion, can spill over into other aspects of life,
Absolutely, man. You never know. You might be taking your family out to the movies, and it's already happened here. Active shooter, that's the buzzword nowadays. Whatever the case is, just being prepared, man. training with your equipment and your kit, or however you carry your, your systems or your guns, your medical equipment, and just training with it and just becoming very natural, being very confident with it in case of an emergency or, something breaks out.
Right, and it's interesting also because I feel like the whole concept of mastering the basics,
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of gets you to the top of your game. I think that really applies to almost everything. If sports and a whole bunch of other different avenues of life that all correlates and comes together. So, can we talk about your military background, like what motivated you to join the Army, and then if we can kind of go through your career?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so the reason I joined the Army, I joined the Army in the very early 90s, around 1990, 91. I'd done some time in college, um, went into the job market, and the career field, I wanted to be a chef, actually. Funny story.
Really?
Yeah, and I worked as a chef. I worked as a sous chef, so like basically the 2IC of a kitchen. Not right away, but after some time and experience, I worked in a few different restaurants, and it was during the early 90s. We had a really bad recession, so a lot of restaurants were either going out of business or business slowed down tremendously. And I always had this thing in the back of my head that said, I wanted to be a Green Beret, and it might have been John Wayne movie. I don't know.
Yeah.
Watching a lot of movies, Navy SEALs, that kind of stuff. So, I just got tired of it, man. So I went to the recruiter. I was like, hey, want to be a Green Beret? And at that time, you couldn't join the Army and become a Green Beret. You had to have time in the Army already and have worked in a certain occupational skill specialty. So I did that. Joined the Army 1992, worked in an MOS. I was a Stinger missile guy. So basically, I went around with infantry guys and protected them from air attack, close range air attack. Not a really exciting job. The recruiting video I saw was, pretty awesome. And the recruiter was like, hey, you want to be a Ranger with a Patriot missile on your shoulder? I'm like, yeah, maybe. And, for lack of, or for ignorance on my part, lack of research, yeah, I took that job.
Well, I think the recruiters will kind of get a lot of people, right? If you're not,
they'll get you. Yeah, they'll get you if you're not careful. You got to do your research, which I did none. So I watched movies. That was my research. And anyways, eventually I became a Green Beret after doing my time and trying out and stuff like that. So I became an 18 Delta, a Special Forces medic. Which wasn't my first choice, but hey, what are you going to do? I became a Green Beret. I was pretty excited about that, and worked in that field. Went to 5th Special Forces Group at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Didn't want to go there. Wanted to go to 7th Group because I already knew Spanish. And they used to do, back in the 90s, they did much cooler trips than 5th Group did, based on their area of operations, right? South America, Central America.
Yeah.
Not the Middle East. But once the war kicked off, 9/11 happened, the war kicked off, everybody's area of responsibility was the Middle East, so it didn't really matter at that point. Right. So did that for a while. I probably did three deployments as a Green Beret, combat deployments. I guess it was probably around 2004, 2005. And then I tried out for the Army Special Missions Unit, and I made it. While there, I did numerous deployments, got in a lot of good gunfights, learned a lot of lessons, lost some good friends, and then I retired. I retired 20 years later after my initial enlistment, 2012.
Okay, so you've been out for a couple of years now.
I've been retired for 5 years now. Yep.
Right. So I didn't know you were an 18 Delta. That's
funny story. That was my last choice. Well, no, that wasn't my last choice. Commo was my last choice, and my motivating My saving grace for getting me through the 18 Delta course was I did not want to go become a commo guy and spend 8 hours a day learning Morse code, because that's what they did with the washouts of the 18 Delta course. They sent them over to the Echo course. So that motivated me. So I was studying my ass off, man. Like, I'm not lying or exaggerating when I say I literally studied 6 hours a night.
Yeah, I know that's an incredibly difficult course to pass. And then I know the majority of the special operations medics from the other units, they only go through about half of that course, whereas the 18 Deltas complete the entire course.
Yeah, that's correct. They go through the SOCM portion, the first half.
And what's the second half called?
SFMS, Special Forces Medical Sergeant, which is another 6-month course, which is a little more detailed, a little more in depth, more clinical stuff, more kind of diagnosing patients, running tests, learning the diagnostics, and just longer term care kind of stuff, as opposed to combat trauma, first responders. There I am on scene, guy just got blowed up. What do I do? That would be the first half.
Right. So when you went through the 18 Delta course, was TCCC already prominent, or did that come later?
Nope, that came much later. Back then, during my 18 Delta training, it was ABCs. Remember ABCs, right?
Oh,
Airway,
no,
breathing,
no.
circulation. Yeah.
Okay.
There's acronyms and buzzwords, that guys get through, that kind of stuff. ABC, initial assessment, primary assessment, and then detailed assessment were the three, I guess, phases of casualty care when I was doing the course. Now it's TCCC, and there's a couple other acronyms out there, March and that kind of stuff.
By the time TCCC came out, were you still working as a 18 Delta, or had you already made that career progression?
No, I already crossed over to the dark side.
I know talking about that kind of stuff, you got to be vague, but did you continue doing medical work in that side, or no?
So yeah, the great thing about that unit was they kind of harbor your natural abilities and or your previous training. So you never know what's going to happen. You might have a mass cal event when you have a lot of casualties. So all the 18 Deltas, whether operator qualified or their support guys, whatever their role is in that unit, they still maintain their currency. They're still sent through the Special Forces medical refresher every 2 years, and they maintain their skills in that way, because you never know, man. Stuff happens, and I've actually been in some pretty bad gunfights where I was needed to perform 18 Delta training or skills.
Right, and I know that through the GWAT, one of the positives to come from it is the amount of guys coming back and surviving battlefield wounds.
Yep.
And I guess that's with the emergence of the TCCC and the widespread tourniquet use.
Yeah. Now, when I learned how to put tourniquets on, it was forbidden. Like, no one could ever do it. It was the last case. This is when I first joined the Army, and last ditch effort. Don't apply a tourniquet unless that's it. Now you got law enforcement guys carrying cat tourniquets. You got paramedics are throwing them on. You got like everybody, even civilians are learning how to do TCCC through one form or another.
Right, and I think kind of using that the philosophy of everybody should know how to use a tourniquet, and that really saved a lot of lives on the battlefield. I think that same philosophy, if applied here in the States, would save a lot of preventable deaths, like car crashes or whatever.
Absolutely.
Total, just over 20 years in the Army, right?
Yeah, a little over, a few months over 20.
Okay, right. So throughout your time, were you enlisted or were you an officer?
I was an enlisted guy.
Okay. Leadership is something that is kind of something that's sought out by human beings or big companies, and people kind of want to learn about leadership or what's the best way to lead. And
Right.
Serving in some of these units, this is something that you guys have had to develop, especially under fire or being in a really bad gunfight. What, in your opinion, what are some of the good qualities of a leader that you've seen in your time in the military?
That's a good question. All right, so good qualities of a leader. To me, a leader is a guy who, not a guy, a person who can assess a situation and make timely decisions. Though they may not be the best decisions, they need to be timely to initiate some type of reaction to get things moving. Lack of leadership, a lot of times I've seen, is somebody not making a decision in a timely manner where it affected the outcome, and it very well could be a catastrophic outcome. So, there's a lot of traits to leadership. I could sit here for hours to talk about leadership. And it's, to me, the biggest thing is it's a certain type of personality, man. And there's people that will disagree with that. There's natural born leaders out there, and it's a personality trait. You're either born with it or you're not. I'm not saying you can't learn it, because you absolutely can, and I've seen guys do that. My 20 years in the Army, I was very introverted when I joined, and I had to be a little more assertive at times and kind of develop that. And I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it does. It does. And I think, me, personally myself, I've kind of been more introverted earlier in life,
Sure. Yeah. Because you're young. Experience
Right.
gives you confidence, and confidence is a big part of that leadership. That's probably one of the bigger traits, is just confidence. And it's not cockiness or brashness. It's just, hey, man, I've done this. This is what I'm going to do to handle this. And like I said, that helps you with those timely decisions. They may not be the best decision, but it's a decision. It gets actions happening. It starts movement necessary to either accomplish the mission or deal with whatever the crisis is, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And I've been around people in situations of work environment where I felt like that confidence wasn't there from the individual who was in that leadership role.
Sure.
And it really showed in other areas, like kind of being a little bit, what's the word, like too heavy-handed in some instances.
Right.
And then in another instance where you should be kind of heavy-handed, you kind of fall back from it. It's kind of ends up being kind of backwards. Spending 20 years in the Army in special operations during the GWAT, obviously you have a ton of stories from your time in combat. Can you share a story with the audience, just to kind of give them a taste of what that was like for you?
Yeah, I suppose. Like, what are you looking for? What type of story?
Just something that maybe stood out to you. It could be on a deployment. It could be something that during training that was kind of funny to you, or anything like that.
Yeah, I could do that. I've probably got a lot of them. Let's talk about poor leadership, and I'll give you kind of an example.
Okay.
Okay, so in Special Forces, my first team sergeant, he was an old timer, I guess. He had been in SF since the early 90s. This time frame was 2004. It was OIF. You're familiar with OIF, the acronyms, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So OIF 2, 2004, it was when Fallujah was the Wild West. Right around the time the Nick Berg beheading, Abu Musab al-Zarqawi was kind of taking over
Right.
Iraq, or Al-Qaeda of Iraq, and it was the kind of predecessor to the Islamic State as it is today. So we had 2 ODAs, one on each side of Fallujah. One ODA, the other ODA, was actually living in Fallujah on the outskirts in a team house and performing daily operations, different operations that SF guys do when they're in that role. My team, we were living on a fob on the opposite side of town, and we were doing operations also, kind of the safer side, I guess. And this was due to this team sergeant was he was getting ready to wrap it up after this deployment, call it a retirement. He didn't want to risk anything or any equipment, that kind of thing. I kind of get that, but played it extremely safe, and we had ample opportunities. We were building target packages on some big hitters in the bad guy world, in the Al-Qaeda world. Guys that were directly involved with Zarqawi and a couple other people. So anyways, the ultimate slap in the face was, all right, hey guys, one day, this was Easter 2004, hey, we're going to go resupply the other guys in town. And that's what we did occasionally, resupply convoys in broad daylight in military vehicles looking like big army machine, which typically at that time frame in Fallujah, if you were looking like big army and you were driving around in daylight, you're going to get ambushed, right? So
Right.
sure as shit, man. We went out there, no incursions on the way out. While at the team house, we did start taking some pot shots, some random gunfire. I remember I was on the rooftop with my sniper buddy, with the other team's sniper team, and we're just kind of doing some observation, looking around. They were pointing out some key features of the local terrain and some of the players there. And we were taking some gunfire, so we got a few opportunities to return some shots and do some counter sniper stuff. So then the team sergeant's like, "Hey, time to go home. I had enough of this." I don't know if it was stress or whatever. So we left, and this was, like I said, broad daylight, and we did not vary our route, which that's kind of one of the 101 of your route selection is don't vary your routes, don't take the same route, especially if you're in a column of 3 gun trucks, 3 Humvees, a big Iraqi cargo truck, Iraqi leaderships, and a Land Rover Defender, and 1 or 2 other vehicles. But we left that way against some of the guys on the team's advice. He's like, no, we're just going to go the way we came in. So we did, and lo and behold, I'm driving, I don't know, I think it was vehicle number 3. I see a RPG come off this second deck balcony, completely missed the lead vehicle, thank goodness, and explode, off in the distance. And then all of a sudden, machine gun fire opens up on us. And I could see tracer rounds literally in front of passing over my hood. So at that point, everything slows down, and I'm thinking to myself, shit, man. This might be my day. So whatever, let's get through it. Let's fight through it. So the crew served weapons on those GMVs, those Humvees. They started returning fire. We had 3 gun trucks, 3 Humvees, which are armed with a 50 cal up front, a 40 cal, an automatic 40 cal as the second vehicle, and then the third Humvee was another 50 cal, an M2. So 2 out of those 3 weapon systems went down, right? Murphy's Law. Oh, yeah. So the lead 50 cal, his gun went down. My truck, which was the 40 cal, the Mark 19, went down. And the only really crew served weapon that was given to him was that rear 50 cal. We did have 240s on the backs of our Humvees, which were manned by, we had some Marine guys attached to us at that time. They were pulling PSD for the Marine First Mardiv commander. Well, I believe at the time was
Mattis or
General Mattis, actually.
Yeah.
Yep. So it was his PSD guys. They used to come hang out with us when they weren't working with him, and kind of shoot the bull and kind of hang out with SF guys, I guess, whatever. So they were returning fire with our crew serve machine guns on the backs of our Humvees. We had a couple guns go down. We started taking mortar fire, 60 millimeter mortars. One hit my rear axle, or my right rear wheel, blew it out. All of a sudden my truck stops. I'm revving the engine, giving it gas, and it's not going anywhere. Something got jarred loose. The team sergeant, he starts, he's in a panic, so he's yelling stuff, get behind cover, or get this vehicle behind cover. He's about to jump off the vehicle and run and get behind some cover. And I told my buddy driving that third gun truck behind us, it's like, hey dude, ram us, man. Push us out of the kill zone. We were basically on the X taking somewhat effective fire.
Right.
And he did. He rammed me. All my tires were blown out, but the Humvees have run flats. He rammed me. It jostled something. I think it was the transfer case slipped when we got that first mortar round. Kind of jarred something. And anyways, it came back. So I was able to drive off. So I drove off the X. The crew serve weapon guy on my crew serve weapon in our vehicle, he started shooting AT4s because we did have some AT4s and some other stuff. So, he was just trying to return some fire to get us out of there so we could break contact. And luckily, we made it about a mile away. We were able to kind of reconsolidate and reorganize. And I could change my flat tire, one of them anyways, because I had one spare. And we kind of went back after that. We did end up losing 2 Iraqi guys. Actually, one of them was wounded pretty bad, but he survived. That Defender, or I'm sorry, the Land Rover, I guess it was a Defender, got mortared and kind of flipped over on its side. The driver was killed. The passenger had a pretty serious gunshot wound, but he survived. The other team actually went back and got those guys out of there after we hauled ass. So not a good time for us in our team. And that stood out in my mind as, you asked the leadership question, good traits of leadership. That stands out in my mind. Like, I'll never forget that day, thanking the Lord that nobody on my team or the Marines got a scratch somehow. Actually, a couple of the Marines on the backs did get some scratches, and they ended up receiving Purple Hearts, which is bullshit, but whatever. But we survived. Some of us got some valorous awards and all that for getting out of there and getting off the X. But long story short, poor leadership led that. That could have completely been avoided for a few simple reasons, or with a few simple reasons or solutions. You know what I mean?
Right. And I think after a situation like that, I think the team kind of loses faith in him as a leader, and that could have a negative effect going forward, I guess.
Absolutely. And I put my packet in to go to the SMU as soon as we got back from that deployment.
Yeah, that's like motivation, right?
Yeah, I'm like, you know what? I'm not working for this clown anymore.
Yeah. And it's interesting because you would assume that being in Special Forces, being a Green Beret, all the guys in the leadership roles are, top of their game. It's not always like that.
True. It's not. Much to my, disappointment.
Right. And you mentioned Al-Zakari, and
yep.
I was listening to a popular podcast. Was it last night or the night before? And they were talking about Iraq and how the Islamic State kind of shocked people, and no one knew anything about him until you see him on Twitter cutting people's heads off. But
yep.
I thought that couldn't be further from the truth, because Zakari, he's well known for what he was doing in Iraq, and
absolutely.
And his followers kind of kept that going for a number of years. So it's it's just amazing to me how ignorant people are on some of these issues.
Well, you know they're uninformed, and our media doesn't do the best job of reporting what's actually happening. You know, as they say, the ground truth. My friend, the Islamic State was the Islamic State as early as the early 2005 2006. We didn't call it. Some of them did. Some of them addressed it as the Islamic State. They were starting it. It was the predecessor,
Right.
including Zarqawi. There was communications intercepted by him calling it the Islamic State of Iraq, or just the Islamic State. They called it AQIZ, or Al Qaeda of Iraq, and he did report to I think it was Bin Laden himself.
Yeah.
However, he was starting his own fatwa, his own crusade, for lack of a better term. I shouldn't use the word crusade, but basically the Islamic State, that was the predecessor. So, you see ISIL, ISIS, all this stuff now, that's just a new buzzword, man. It's been the Islamic State for some time now. But it's like you said, I don't want to call it ignorance, because just people are just uninformed. They don't know, man. They don't know what they don't know.
Right. And I think, you see some of the stuff they're doing, they're broadcasting everything, so you get to see it, videos and whatnot.
Sure.
But that kind of thing been going on in Iraq since, 2004 or something?
Yeah, 2004, 2005. That was, like I said, the start of the Islamic State.
Right.
I don't think we actually called it the Islamic State till like 08, 09, but.
Right.
Yep.
Right. And they were putting out like, you mentioned Berg. I think Nick Berg was his name. He was beheaded by Zarqawi.
Yep.
And they would put those tapes out like at the markets and whatnot.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they had
these
DVDs at the markets.
Right.
They were issuing out DVDs. Yep.
Right. So I guess what's now known as what we know as ISIS today is the only difference is that they got people who know how to use social media.
Exactly. They have the social media. They have the network. Man, they have the interweb at their disposal. The interwebs, and they're taking advantage of it. They get a lot of young guys that know how to maximize that, and they're taking off with it.
Right. Right, but it's interesting. I've read a couple books about them, them and some of the other groups out there, and they'll kind of be effective at fighting a government or taking land, but they're completely ineffective at governing. Once they get to that governing part, that's when the rift starts to build between the people. Because they kind of really push that really strict interpretation of the Islamic laws and whatnot, like cutting people's hands off for stealing and that kind of thing.
Yep.
And I think there's only so much people could take that in today's day and age. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah, I think the extremism or the Islamic radicalism that that however you want to call it. People are seeing this like these people are sick, man. They have problems. We don't want to be part of it, and they're being, disowned by their own countrymen, so to speak. You know what I mean? So thank goodness for that. I mean, people are realizing, hey, these people are radical. They're crazy. A lot of those guys. I mean, the war, if you want to call it that, still today's battlefield is a result of us being there for so long, camping out and rebuilding infrastructure and building governments and trying to spread democracy the American way, where you've got cultures that have been battling centuries old cultures that, don't want to have anything to do with it. So, but we want to force feed it down everybody's throat. And what it does is it creates animosity, and it creates what's the word? Just angry people, man. They don't want to be part of it, so they start going to the radicalist side, and they want to kill Americans. It's like, hey, let's go kill an American. Let's travel from Kenya to go kill some Americans, and then we'll come back home and have dinner and all that good stuff.
I think Zarqawi really took advantage of those age-old kind of beefs that they had.
Yep.
between Sunni and Shia Muslims, and
Right.
really stoke the flames. And it's really unfortunate I mean, hindsight is always 20/20, right? But
Sure.
if looking back at the early days, they had a couple opportunities to kind of remove him from the battlefield, and didn't really take it up, maybe not knowing how important it would have been to do that. And then, kind of, in the early days, I think it was kind of mismanaged, like before the insurgency began.
Right.
Iran kind of sped into the south of Iraq and Zaqqari in the north, and they kind of set the stage for what would become, a really bad place for a number of years.
Right. Yeah, it was mismanaged to a point, and that's kind of got out of our hands. It became kind of a lot bigger than we planned, and it is what it is.
Yeah. So kind of fast forwarding, you also do canine stuff, right? With your company?
Yeah, I do. It's so real quick, funny kind of thing. So canine is something I did the least amount of time in my special operations career, my last 2 years, and this was due to, well, there's a couple of reasons. I tore my ACL when I was about 18 years in the Army, and I was at a decision point there. Am I going to make E9? Am I going to continue? Am I going to go past 20? Because there's a huge bonus if I do. But I'm sorry, it was like 19 years. But I need to do surgery and 9 months of rehab. I was already a handler, but I tore my ACL while I was a dog handler, doing decoy work of all things for dogs. So I had to make a decision, and I did want to retire at 20. So in order to do that, I had to do a job where I was kind of in a non-deployable status so I could get my recovery and my surgery and all that good stuff, rehabilitation, so I could retire on time. So I took the job as a 2IC of my unit's kennel and kind of helped manage the canine program, which was awesome. I learned a ton there. I worked with some top-notch trainers, and that kind of led me into my first job as I retired. So it was pretty cool. But it is the thing I did the least amount of time, just 2 years.
Right. So you've done a whole bunch of things in terms of specialty and roles in special operations, right?
Sure. I did pretty much everything. You hear jack of all trades, master of none. I was an assaulter. I was a breacher. I did master breacher a little while. I was a sniper. I did kind of the human kind of advanced special operations stuff, managing sources and that kind of stuff. Operations, I worked in operations for a little while. So I did a little of everything, try to expand my horizons, if you will.
What rank did you end up finishing up at?
I retired as a master sergeant.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so the canine stuff is pretty interesting.
Yep.
I don't remember exactly. I think like utilizing canines wasn't fully implemented until like a couple of years into the GWOT, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, absolutely, man. That was a brand new capability to SOF, Special Operations Forces. We didn't have it before the war, and there was a pilot program at a special unit. Started with a couple of dogs and a couple of motivated guys that wanted to learn about them, and they hired a superb trainer, probably one of the best in the country, former police dog guy. He's a huge name in the police dog industry, police canine industry. We brought him to our place, and he helped get that going, and it became the spearhead, if you will, of all soft canine programs. Because once we started implementing dogs in all of our operational groups, Rangers followed on, SEALs followed in, SF, Green Berets, MARSOC eventually got them, or, before it wasn't MARSOC, but once it was MARSOC, they took on the canine capability. Now it's huge. It's huge. I mean, they have seminars just for soft canine stuff now, so it's pretty cool. The evolution, because it was an awesome tool, man. I'm standing here talking to you right now with a pulse, because several canines have saved my ass, either intercepting a guy wearing a suicide vest waiting to clack himself off, or standing in the corner of a building with an AK waiting to burn us down as we breach the door. So they're an awesome tool.
Yeah, and it's really incredible that some of the abilities that they have in terms of smelling and obviously the hearing is and whatnot.
Yeah.
What about these canines and obviously these canines that you guys are going out with are top notch canines?
Yes.
Going through a selection process and whatnot.
Yep. Absolutely.
What are some of those qualities that make them special, and what is it that they can do necessarily? They can. I know they can like smell fear, that kind of thing.
A lot of it is genetic. A lot of it is breeding lines, and the Europeans have been doing it way longer than we have, so they're really good at it. So we went to the Europeans and we asked them, "Hey, what makes a working dog badass and do certain things?" Because we're looking for a dog that can do multiple tasks, not just they call them single purpose canines, a dog that'll only detect explosives, or a dog that will only search for bad guys and bite them. We need a multi-purpose, or we used to call them dual dogs, dual purpose canines. So it was a dog that did apprehension work as well as search for explosives. So we test them, right? Like you said, a selection process. Oh, their selection and assessment is probably a lot more rigorous than ours. I've seen more dogs
Really?
get sent home packing to the vendors we got them from because they didn't cut the mustard, as they say, or meet our criteria. Yeah, it's pretty rigorous, man. They go through like a 30-day initial training and assessment, and I would say the attrition rate in its heyday was probably in the 80 to 90 percentile.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it was pretty rough, man. But basically, to answer your question, I know that's a kind of dragged out answer. We look for really good olfactory work, use of the nose, because that's how they help us find either stinky bad guys to kill or explosives that will kill us, right? Also, they see better in the dark than we do. Most people don't know this. They have better infrared eyesight than we do because real short anatomy lesson, you have rods and cone cells that make up your eyes, and what you see, we have more rods and cones, which allows us better visual acuity, sight at distance, and it allows us a broader scheme of color spectrum, right? Dogs have more cones than rods, so they see better in the dark than we do, but they don't see colors as well as we do, and their visual acuity isn't as good as us for distance. So that's why you have a handler with a dog. They're a team. It's not just the dog, right? Because the handler is typically the brains of the operation, or at least that's the way we like to think of it. And he has, he's using that canine in the best way he can, according to the what makes sense at the time. But good nose, good eyesight, good hearing. They use all their senses, everything. So that's typically what we look for. Oh, and nerve. We call it nerve. That urge to get in there and get it on, no matter what the threat to yourself is, because we need dogs to do that. We need courageous dogs. We need brave dogs. We don't need a dog that hears gunfire and then puts his tail between his legs and runs behind the group of guys, right? We want a guy that hears a dog that hears gunfire and is like, sticks his ears up, turns his head, is like, where's that coming from? And how can I get over there to go eat him, right? So in a nutshell, that's what we're looking for. Strong, nervy dogs, but social, because there's a lot of chaos, and we don't want them biting operators or good guys.
Right. So would you be able to, because you mentioned that you've had your life saved by a canine. Would you be able to share just like a short story of an instance that happened, or?
Yeah, I've got a bunch of those. So I'll give you an example. Okay. So typically we lose dogs in what we call an area search. So helicopters come in, assaulters get on the ground, they assault a target. During that loud ruckus the bad guys hear, they typically a lot of them will go and hide off in nearby wood lines or fields or culverts or whatever terrain they have, they hide. And a lot of times they wear suicide vests because they were big time guys, and we were going after some high value people. So typically they wear those, or they build them. So what happens is we have technology that sees those things happening on the battlefield before we get there, and they give us radio calls, right? And they're like, "Hey, you got us." We call them squirters. We got a squirter at this location, approximately in 100-meter radius of this area. Okay, so after we're doing when we're done doing what we need to do at the target, we'll go and deal with that. So we'll send out a security team and a canine team, right? The security team's kind of providing ground security while the dog and handler do their thing looking for that bad guy. And they have a general area that they're searching. So typically, the downwind side makes sense, right? We'll go to the downwind side if it's tactically feasible, and we'll start that search with the dog. And my man, there's nothing like that look in that dog's eyes when he hits that odor of that bad guy, and he's like, "Oh yeah, it's on." And then it's up to the handler to make that decision. Hey, do I send him? What's the threat? Or do I just kind of let him direct us in a little closer, so we kind of use other means, i.e. CAS, close air support, or we throw grenades, or whatever the case may be, dictated by the ground situation. But they're awesome, man. They make work a lot quicker and easier for us in hunting down those bad guys, because I know personally, like I said, where ambushes are laid waiting for us, and the dog keyed up on that and picked up on it before we did. Even with ISR and all this other cool technology, they don't see everything on the battlefield. And we've had times where we've gone after known enemy positions with ISR, and then a good crosswind comes and the dog picks up, turns his head, and hauls ass in that direction because he smelled somebody that was there that we didn't know about. And when the bad guys see that dog running at them, they typically try to light them up. So, they skid rounds off the ground, and sometimes the dogs get killed. But a lot of lives get saved. A lot of lives get saved.
Yeah, I've had a special forces dog handler on the show, like in the early episodes of the show.
Yep.
And he told a story like that where they were patrolling in Afghanistan and they were walking into an ambush, and they had an AC-130 above them. Yep. Scoping the area out, and they didn't even realize it. But it was the dog who kind of smelled the ambush, I guess.
The dog's sensors are so keen and so attuned. It's like words can't describe it, man. They're incredible animals. They're so good at it, and they love it. They live for it. Like, that's the hugest reward to a working dog, is to bite somebody. Yeah. They like it better than treats and praise and tennis balls and all that stuff. It's pretty cool.
Right, and these dogs are, like you said, there's dogs who you call like single-purpose dogs, a bomb-sniffing dog or whatever.
Right.
But these dogs, having that kind of dual purpose, like you said, are really kind of like the top of the line of any dogs anywhere, really.
Yeah. Well, because if you think about it, the cost-benefit analysis and kind of analyzing the training and man hours that go into producing a dog of that caliber, kind of like an operator of that caliber, the highest level operator, you spend, millions of dollars on a guy throughout the course of his career to get him the schools and the training and all the, stuff he needs to do. Same thing with the dogs, man. They might drop, I don't know. We'll give ballpark numbers here. Let's say we spend $12,000 on, we'll call it a green dog, a dog that has no operational training, just some basic bite work, some basic obedience, and maybe a little nose work. So we have to train that dog to find explosives, not just one or two explosives, 15 different explosive odors that are the basic compounds that make most of your HMEs, homemade explosives, and your military grade explosives. All right. In addition to training the dog to learn all those odors, we need to train them to find guys in the dark, in the woods, in the mountains. So there's all these, we call it environmental stuff, that we have to work on. Oh, yeah. And he's got to do CQB with the guys, right? So he's going to go in that breach right after that door blew off its hinges, which is a pretty traumatic event, right, for the average dog
Right.
or person. Go in there and look for bad guys to eat, while there's assaulters flowing in behind him, engaging said bad guys, throwing flashbangs, placing door charges, all this chaos that's going on. And the dog has to single all that stuff out and put it aside and continue to search for a bad guy. And that's a lot of stress and a lot of inoculation that we do to those dogs to get them to that level, man. You're probably talking about man hours alone a year, training a dog for about a year, 5 days a week, 8-hour days. Well, you don't train a dog 8 hours. You probably train the actual dog, let's say 4 hours of actually training, because there's breaks and there's other dogs that got to run the problem. But man, there's a lot of time and effort that goes into making those dogs what they are.
Yeah, I mean, that's really incredible because regular dogs in the street or whatever hear a loud bang or something and they're like reacting to it. But
yeah,
that chaos of assaulting a house, flashbangs going off.
Make it, and he's got to discriminate.
Right.
Is there operators in that room already and bad guys at the same time? So he's going to discriminate and say, oh no, I'm not biting you, but I'm biting that guy over there in the corner with the AK-47 or whatever the case is.
Right. Yeah,
so
that's really incredible.
They're very switched on, as we say.
So here's something I wanted to ask you about. It's something that I want to dive deeper into on the podcast, and not just bring awareness, but bring solutions and finding those solutions through talking to guys like yourself, right? Recently, they've released a study about brain injuries in NFL athletes. I think they did out of 111 guys' brains that they looked at, 110 of them had brain damage. And that's from being hit over and over throughout the course of their career.
Yep.
Big, strong, fast guys hitting each other and whatnot. For guys who are in combat in the military, that is also something that's commonplace, as you're always in small, confined spaces. Grenades are going off, explosions are going off.
Sure.
Or you get blown up going over an ID or whatever.
Yep.
So there's something interesting. I had on the last podcast episode that I did, I had a guy who was a independent duty corpsman who was attached to a Marine Raider battalion for a couple of deployments.
Yep.
And he was wounded by a grenade fragment. They threw a grenade in the area that he was at, and so from that he had a TBI. He had read this after he got out or whatever. He'd read this study about this guy was attempting to bring honor to some of these World War I veterans who were executed as deserters on the battlefield. And what the guy was saying a lot of these guys were working like around artillery and whatnot. So what he was saying is after he was able to study some of their brain tissue and what happened, what he is saying happened is that these guys basically caught TBI. They were disorientated, kind of walked off where they were supposed to be at as a result of that, and that led to them being executed.
Right.
Is TBI something that you've dealt with? You've seen some of your teammates deal with? Absolutely.
Most of the operators I know, probably, if I had to put a percentage to it, I'd say at least 70%, myself included, have traumatic brain injuries. Yep.
And that's just a result of years of being in these overpressurized environments.
Oh, yeah. Being really, probably a little close to a lot of charges, a little too close. Helicopter hard landings, crashes, explosions, IEDs, mortar rounds, like I told you about that ambush on Easter of 2004. A lot of close proximity mortar rounds. Just being concussed, constant. Shooting gunfire, man. High rates of gunfire in really tight rooms. I mean, it all produces concussion of some form, and it does take its toll. It does affect you. Yep.
Some of the guy I was talking with, what he was saying was he felt like some of the issues of PTSD, or where people were diagnosed with PTSD, he felt like those were incorrect diagnosis, and in some cases it was just the effects of the TBI, like the
Right.
memory loss and some of that.
Well, yeah. So here's Fred's take on traumatic brain injury and more so post-traumatic stress disorder. I think PTSD is the term they're using today. And as they learn more about it, because 10 years ago, they didn't know, I don't want to put numbers and stuff. Let's say half. They didn't know half what they know today, right? 10 years ago. They're learning stuff. There's a new clinic now just for traumatic brain injuries for the military, which didn't exist when I got mine. So they're making evolution and huge changes for the good for that. However, there's still a lot they don't understand, man. The brain is a hard organ to study and understand, because while it's living, you can't remove it. You can't, you just can't do a lot of stuff to the brain like you can to other stuff that you can take biopsies and stuff like that from. I don't know, man. I think PTSD in some form. So let me get back. Let me just cut it. Let me make it short. So my thoughts on PTSD. I think combat changes everyone. Okay. I'm a different person today than I was 20 years ago. Okay. Some of that is probably related to combat. I'm not saying I have PTSD. I was never diagnosed with it because I really don't know what PTSD is. I'm not an expert. I know what the signs and symptoms are of it, which I don't have any. I do have traumatic brain injury, and I count my blessings every day, and I thank the good Lord that I don't have PTSD, as they say. But I'm different. My wife tells me all the time when we have, our little scuffles and stuff. She's like, you're not the same person. And you're like, yeah, I know, I got it. And I'm learning how to deal with it and how to, how to cope or how to manage. Because I do have, you hear the term brain farts and, brain fog and that kind of stuff. I have it all the time. Right. And one of the reasons I chose to retire at 20 instead of going to 25 and taking a huge fat bonus is because of that, man. I don't want to be a liability to my mates on the battlefield. And there was a couple times where I kind of looked at myself, you step back and look at yourself, and you're like, yeah, I don't really like the way I handled that, or maybe that wasn't the best decision. So, I had to be a good sport, man, and say, thanks, it was fun, but, it's probably time for me to move on. And that's one of the reasons. I had a few other reasons as well. A lot of injuries, a lot of orthopedic stuff and whatnot. But, who doesn't that's been in, that much war? But yeah, man, I think PTSD is a real thing. And I think we're learning about it more and more every day. I know guys like Tom Spooner that have devoted their lives to research and recovery and rehabilitation and doing awesome things, for it. But it's something we don't know a whole lot about at this point in time.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned Tom Spooner, because I heard him on a podcast. He was talking about this is a couple of years ago, maybe 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and he was talking about PTSD, and I can't remember exactly what I knew about it before or what I thought about it. You kind of don't really know exactly. You don't know details of it, and then at some point you learn about it, and then your perspective changes.
Sure.
But I remember listening to him talk about it, and I specifically remember him saying that it got to a point where he felt more normal in Iraq or in a war zone than he did at home with his wife and his kids. And I remember when he said that to me, that's when I was just like completely kind of stunned by what,
right.
That revelation. And
yeah,
and that was part of what inspired me to kind of, do this podcast and get more involved in the veteran space,
That's actually very common. I've had similar thoughts. Transitioning from being on combat deployments, 3 months or 4 months on, 3 months, 4 months off, and then back and forth, you get into this rhythm and this rut, not a rut, but a rhythm. And It is challenging, man. I've been retired 5 years now. I'm still adjusting to this life because
Right.
the stuff I was doing before is not even close to the stuff that I do today, no matter who I'm teaching or what I'm talking about. So it's definitely an
Right.
adjustment, man. Yeah.
Right. I mean, you go from running 100 miles per hour to to kind of living somewhat normal life, or what we consider normal in the United States, and I'm sure that's a huge transition to make. Outside of exactly what Tom Spooner was talking about, or what he talks about, I feel like this is from, I've talked to a lot of guys in special operations, and some of them have felt like one of the things that have helped them is kind of getting back into, or getting into certain philosophy, because just like anything else, nothing that's going on today hasn't happened in the past, right? So,
Right.
I mean, obviously it's different for warriors in whatever 14th century. They weren't dealing with airstrikes and whatever, right? But
Sure.
it's all similar stuff. So if you look at some of the history, or things written by warriors from the past, I guess it'll help you understand some of it in some way. And at least some guys feel like that. I'm not sure what your take on that kind of stuff is.
Yeah, man. It's an experience. I mean, I'll never forget it. I have no regrets. I sleep great at night. I have a little sleep apnea, but I'm dealing with that. But I sleep well. I don't have any issues, not that I know of. Other than I'm a little bit probably different than I was, but plus I'm old. I'm an old man now. I'm in my well into my 40s, so I get made fun of for a lot. But yeah, man, it's a life changing experience, and it depends in different degrees how much weird or bad or bizarre stuff you were exposed to. If you look at the movies like Hacksaw Ridge, I see guys, that's a true story. I see guys that went through that and saw that stuff when they scaled that cliff. And like, I look at that, I'm like, oh my God, like, how did they continue to charge forward? Like,
Right.
you knew you were going to die. You said in your mind, I'm dying today, and I don't know, man. In the invasion of Normandy, I mean, Iwo Jima, you pick it. Those
Right.
guys like that, my grandfather, my older uncles, I'm like, how did they deal with that? Like, how did that not change them, So,
I think there was a difference. Culturally, we were a little different back in the day.
sure, sure.
Like more reserved, kind of. I guess more conservative overall.
Yep.
And the culture was just different. Like I had a guy on the podcast, and he's become a good friend of mine. He was a team leader in Mac V SOG in Vietnam. He was a Green Beret.
Yep.
He had I think it was a cousin or a brother-in-law or something like that, who served in an infantry unit, and they were both wounded in Vietnam, and they came home, and he said they never had one conversation about
Right.
Vietnam,
Right.
and that's kind of crazy to me. I just can't imagine, but that's just a kind of difference of the times,
Yeah, exactly. They put it away and they forgot about it, or maybe not forgot about it. You know what I mean? They put it away and it's never coming out again. So,
right, kind of stays in the box. Yeah,
that's right.
right. So if anyone listening, or anybody, I'm going to post this on social media and whatnot. If anyone's interested in linking up with you for some training or consulting or whatever, where's the best place they can do that?
So I'm on Facebook, Storm Tactical Consulting. I also have Instagram, Storm_Tactical_Consulting, all lowercase. And I also have a website. Just Google Storm Tactical Consulting and you'll find it, because it's a free website at this point. So it's a kind of not a really common domain. It's really long, so you have to Google it and you'll get the link.
Okay, so we spoke about in the very beginning. There's a lot of kind of oversaturation in the firearms training industry, and just if anyone listening who takes courses or considering taking a course, obviously a guy like Fred is one of the guys you want to go to for that type of training.
Yeah, there's I got a lot of buddies. They're competitors as well. Sometimes we work together. Sometimes we need help, so we recruit other buddies that know what they're doing. And we talk about it. It's like, yeah, there's a lot of frauds out there, man. And we tell people, you know what? We don't badmouth them. We don't name names or point fingers. We just say, take their class. You might end up wasting, whatever the fee is, 400, 500, who knows what the fee is. And then, take different courses, and you'll see if they know what they're doing. Basically your fundamentals. How well do you improve in that 2-day course or that 3-day course?
Right.
Yep.
Right, because it's all about mastering the basics. Yeah.
That's it. That's all you can do.
All right, cool, man. So, Fred, I just want to thank you for taking up the time to come on here and do this. I know for the people who listen to the show, the discussion we had, and especially when we were talking about the PTSD stuff and the concussion stuff, that really has a lot of value. And like I said, I just want to thank you for taking the time to do this, and thank you for your service as well.
My pleasure, man. Thanks for having me on. I really do appreciate the favor. Kudos to you. Good things.
Cool, man. Thanks. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. Search Global Recon Podcast. If you don't have an Apple product, check us out and give us a download on SoundCloud.com. Just search Global Recon Podcast. Check out my website at www.globalrecon.net. I'm on Instagram at IGRecon. The second account is Black Ops Matter. The third account, which me and my co-host, we manage, is Mission_Critical. I'm on IG Recon at Twitter.